Hello, New Mexico, and welcome to another episode of Around the Roundhouse, a podcast featuring the policies, politics, and unique personalities of the land of enchantment, from the Roundhouse and beyond. My name is Daniel Chacón, and I'm the state government reporter for the Santa Fe New Mexican. Our guest this week is Alisha Tafoya Lucero, Cabinet Secretary for the New Mexico Department of Corrections, which is one of the largest agencies in state government with about 2,000 employees and a budget of nearly $400 million. Ms. Tafoya Lucero, a Santa Fe native, has built an impressive career in the Corrections Department. She began at the Penitentiary of New Mexico as a classification officer and went on to serve in various roles, including as a probation and parole officer, unit manager, deputy warden, and warden before Governor Lujan Grisham appointed her to lead the department in 2019. Madam Secretary, it's an honor to have you as our guest. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Daniel. I'm nervous, but I'm excited to be here.
Well, I got into print for a reason, so I am nervous as well. This has been an interesting experiment to be on camera. So we're both nervous together. We'll get through it together.
Great.
Madam Secretary, may I ask how you got your start in corrections? Did you set out as a little girl to, be the Cabinet Secretary for the Department of Corrections?
Definitely not. In fact, anybody you talk to in corrections, I think we all say that we ended up in corrections by accident. But my first experience in just the world of it, I guess, is when I was at school at UNM. I was working at the Institute for Social Research, a project called the Adult Drug Abuse Monitoring Program, where we, as researchers, would go down to the old BCDC in downtown Albuquerque, and we would interview new arrestees about their involvement in drugs and alcohol. And so it was the first time I'd ever walked into a jail or experienced that type of environment. So it was sort of in the back of my mind. I enjoyed the experience. And then I finished my undergraduate degree. And really what happened was I was applying for state jobs all over the place. I was wanting to move back to Santa Fe. And it was back in the day when we had phone books and phones attached to walls and no email and things like that. So I had put in applications all over the state. And then I moved to Santa Fe. I had this apartment and the portion I lived in burned down. And I was desperate to see who could still interview me. So I get the phone book and I call the state personnel office and I said, what can I do? And they said, well, at this point, it's out of our hands. You need to call the agencies. So with the phone book, I'm calling agency after agency and I call and they say, oh, we just hired. And I called the penitentiary, kind of last resort. And I said, hey, I applied for this position. Did you guys already hire? Is there still an opportunity for an interview? And they said, well, we actually just finished interviewing today, but if you can come in tomorrow, we'll interview you. And so that's that. I ended up interviewing and I got the position and I started my position at the penitentiary in Santa Fe. And it's funny, the very first day I was there, it felt right and I knew I was supposed to be there.
When I think about going into a prison, I'm not going to lie, I get a little bit nervous and maybe a little bit scared. Did you feel any of that?
Well, I had been inside the jail, and that was during the time where people were getting arrested. It was a really sort of rough environment, but I remember going into the prison and feeling like it felt a whole lot safer than walking into that intake center of jail. And the staff, they all seemed like they knew what was going on. And I never really felt that right off the bat. I felt safe, in fact, with the people that I was working around.
And when you started, at what point did you realize that, hey, I can make a career out of corrections?
Yeah, I think I noticed that right away. It was sort of weird. I mean, I had a lot of really great colleagues. They were helpful and willing to teach me how to do things. And I had a deputy warden who really became a mentor to me. His name was Stanley Moya, and he sort of taught me the ropes and never felt like I wasn't wanted there. And just from there forward, I said, well, this was supposed to happen. I mean, maybe this whole apartment burning down thing was exactly how life was supposed to happen. So, yeah. right away I knew, I think.
Right on. It's interesting how life you don't know what kind of path life is going to take you down, and sometimes it just works out for the best. And it sounds like that was your experience. Madam Secretary, one of the things that I've noticed about your department is that there's a lot of women in top leadership positions. Was it like that when you started your career?
Oh my gosh, not even a little bit. There were just so very few women in any top leadership positions, although there were a few that stuck out as like the role model and the people that we were inspired by and wanted to be like. I remember a prison director named Helen Carr and a probation director named Rose Bobchek and a deputy warden at the penitentiary, Joni Brown. And those were always people I looked up to and said, you know, I can be in that place someday. And but no, I mean, in fact, when I remember when I was deputy warden, I would put on every single hiring panel all the time because they needed a female on the interview panel. And I was just all the time all over the state interviewing people. And I guess that was just part of the role. But no, now we have half of our wardens are female, and half of our region managers are female. We have a ton of deputy wardens and directors, deputy directors, people at all levels of the department are female. And I'll say that, you know, for me, we put the word female in front of things, right? Oh, she's a female warden, and or a female police officer, or a female whatever. And so I was always aspiring to say, let's just not do that. Let's just not put a word in front of it. Let's just say she's a warden, she's an officer. And I was hoping that by the time my daughter entered into the workforce, that we would not be feeling like we needed to put female in front of a certain title. And I think we're getting there. I don't think we're quite there yet, but I'm thrilled with the leadership. And in fact, I will share with you that one of our very largest facilities, the Central New Mexico Correctional Facility in Los Lunas, all the wardens are women, the deputies, the warden, and they are doing a phenomenal job leading that team.
Madam Secretary, why does representation matter? Why is it important to have women in leadership positions?
Well, you know, I sort of think I said it because I don't think it needs to matter. It should just be about the position and how good you are at the position. And instead of saying female warden, they should just say warden. And so it matters because we're half the population. And I think that what I'll say about team anyway, in as far as the women in these leadership roles go, these are all brilliant, compassionate, caring people, and they're doing an excellent job. But I would say the same thing for the men that are in the similar roles.
Okay. Madam Secretary, your department oversees 9 and operates 8 of New Mexico's prison facilities and also administers the state's probation and parole system. What's the toughest part of the job?
You know, there's just like a lot of things happening all the time. So it's important to try to keep aware and involved in all of the various areas of the agency. Of course, you have experts in their areas, and then they will come and brief with me and talk with me about things that I need to be aware of or involved in. And managing the budget is a big deal, making sure that we're being responsible with the taxpayer dollars. And I also feel that, you know, at the end of the day, our main job is to keep people safe and to try to help make communities safer. So I think keeping facilities safe, which oftentimes means keeping offenders occupied and making sure officers have the resources that they need, is definitely among the top priorities for me. And it can be a difficult task, especially in those difficult budget years. And in probation and parole, I mean, it's just so large. 46 district offices, they oversee about 12,000 people around the state. And so I feel that we have an enormous responsibility to public safety in the state. I think we do a good job at it, but I don't know that I'd say there's anything about it that isn't difficult to a certain degree.
For sure. Well, let me ask you another question. What is the most rewarding part of your job?
Oh my goodness, there's so many things, but the thing I've been really appreciating lately, because it's something that we did on our website, is we are highlighting success stories for people who left our custody that is amazing, because before it was sort of like this anecdotal thing that you maybe heard about, or you had a PO saying, oh, this client's doing really well, they got a job in the field that we trained them in. Now we are connecting with those people and we're saying, hey, can you talk to us about how what treatment or training you did inside the facility is affecting your life and your family now? And people are excited to do it. So there's several videos on our website where people are telling you about their story and how they lived through incarceration, what treatment or training that they received, and then how their life is going now. And so to me, it's just amazing that we're legitimately able to make a difference in people's lives. And I think in the long run, we're not only affecting that person, but all the people that they affect. So their kids and their parents and their spouses and all the people that they love and the communities they live in are being positively impacted by the changes they've been able to make in their lives. And so to me, that's definitely among the most rewarding things.
Right on. It's important to celebrate our successes. Madam Secretary, during your time as Secretary, you've introduced numerous reentry programs. Can you tell us about some of those initiatives and whether they've had an impact on recidivism?
Yeah, definitely. Well, so one of the things I'll say when I first started, I first took on the agency. Well, first of all, I didn't think I could do it. I really didn't think that I was a good fit. And I remember telling Governor Lujan Grisham, hey, are you sure about this? And I said, I'm not sure about this. So she said, graciously, would you be willing to serve in this role as acting secretary? And I was like so amazed and grateful that she gave me that opportunity. But after a couple of weeks, I was just laughing to myself, like, yes, I absolutely can do this. And I'm always very heartened to appreciate how she saw something in me that I didn't see in me at that time. And so I knew the department. I know the department, and I had seen things that we had done over the years. And sometimes reentry would matter, and sometimes it wouldn't. Sometimes we'd have a reentry czar, and sometimes it wasn't even a thing that we talked about. So there were just a lot of changes that I experienced over the many years I had been with the department. So, one of the first things that I did with reentry that I think matters now and it will matter long into the future is we created this separate budget program code for money from the legislature to be directly appropriated into that area so that the department could no longer decide that reentry didn't matter. But I think it had a lot to do with the successes that we've seen since that time, because then we've been able to ask for funding specifically for the programs that we're working on and doing. So one of the things that we've introduced is technical vocational training and treatment that never used to be a thing at all when during the time I was with the department anyway. So we do things like automotive class, heavy equipment operation, CDL, auto mechanic classes, culinary arts, lots of different technical vocational programs that result in certifications that can lead to real jobs on the outside. We now have technical vocational programs in every single one of our prisons, HVAC, and we're getting people licensed all the time. So it's just incredible to see them leave our custody and know that they have the ability to earn a real living wage when they get out. We have focused heavily on education, adult basic education, as well as higher education. So we work with lots of local universities in our institutions. And as far as our high school equivalencies, we are and have been for this will be our third year in a row where we're beating out every single institution of adult learning in the state for the highest numbers of high school equivalencies earned. And that makes a huge difference. I mean, we're affecting people's self-esteem and affecting their employability. So those are just some of the things that we've done in reentry. We do lots of other things like lots of art type of activities, knitting and quilting. And I know it sounds kind of funny in prison, but it's really a beautiful thing to watch. And then we recently opened up our corrections industry store that's called Old Gumby's Country Store. I don't know if you're aware of that, but we're
Yes.
open. Yeah, we're open the second Friday of the month, and we are able to sell to the public items, crafts, and other products that are made by inmate population. And I think that has given inmates a great opportunity to learn something about being an entrepreneur. And we'll be introducing some entrepreneurial classes to the participants in the coming months. So just every single thing that we can think of. I've got lots of staff with great ideas, and we try stuff, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But we're always ready and willing to do the next thing and see where it takes us.
I had an opportunity to see the culinary training program in action, and it was just wonderful to see the inmates, so passionate and so inspired that there was an opportunity that once they got out, that could be a career that they could pursue. But Madam Secretary, have you all seen changes? I mean, has it had an impact on your recidivism rates?
Yeah, it definitely has. In fact, over the last few years, we've seen a significant decrease in recidivism and reentry. I think there's some stuff about reentry that I don't necessarily agree with the way that we count it across the country, because I don't think that states compare apples and apples. There's lots of oranges and pineapples out there in the way that people report their numbers. But the way that we report our numbers, we have been able to see more than a 10% drop. And when I first entered into the role, we were at the bottom of the list for recidivism, which means we had a really high recidivism rate, and we've been able to reduce more than 10 points. And as we move forward and towards the last year and a half of the administration, our goal will be to break into the top 10 states for the lowest numbers of recidivism. And we do believe that we will meet and beat that.
Well, congratulations. That's a huge accomplishment. Madam Secretary, the Corrections Department is among the state agencies that draw most heavily from the state's risk management fund. Obviously, you all operate in a very high risk environment, but what can your department do to reduce its liabilities?
It's quite a few things. And I'll tell you what, I have an excellent legal team now. It was definitely an area where we were short staffed for a long time, but I have an excellent general counsel, Mark Levot. He's doing great. And a lot of our cases had to do with IPRA responses. And I think what ended up happening for us was that we just didn't have the staff capacity. And so things would fall through the cracks. And Mark has really been able to hire the right people to get that under control. So that was the main things that we did right away. As far as minimizing or managing risk, rather, in facilities and in the field offices, that's something that we work on all the time. I mean, a lot of that has to do with training of our staff, making sure they're familiar with the use of force policy and how to interact with people appropriately. And I think just a lot of it is training, but our staff are just getting so much better at understanding their role as role models to the inmate population. I think that has a lot to do with it. And then, of course, I believe the level to which we monitor vendors makes a big difference as well. And so we have really upped our auditing teams, where we are constantly looking at some aspect of services that are provided to our populations.
Madam Secretary, the ACLU of New Mexico filed a lawsuit against your department a few months ago over a program that it equated to solitary confinement. Is it true some inmates have spent years in restrictive housing as alleged in the lawsuit?
Well, I can't talk about lawsuits and pending litigation, but I can speak generally about that subject matter. So first, I'll say that I believe the term solitary confinement is antiquated and is no longer a relevant term, not only in the New Mexico system, but across the country. The term restricted housing means something different, because when you think of the term solitary confinement, it brings these of territories where people were being mistreated. So in restricted housing in New Mexico, no person ever stays in that status for longer than 30 days, regardless of the circumstances. The people that do get sent to restricted housing, it would be equivalent to a person in the community who committed a violent act and had to be sent to jail. And so those are the types of people that maybe sometimes need to be separated from the population, sometimes for their own safety, sometimes for the safety of other people, because they might be a person that presents a danger. And sometimes it's necessary to separate them while we investigate, same as would happen in the world out in the streets, where the police officers would have to conduct investigation before they decide to let somebody out of jail. We also don't use restricted housing at all for any female offenders or for any youthful offenders. So we're very conscientious about the potential concerns. For us, a lot of our work in changing that, I call it, I guess, the desegregation initiative. And I experienced this just a little bit before I became secretary, but I do recall a time in the agency where people did live in long-term restricted housing. At that time, it was called segregation, I believe. And there were lots of people that were in that status for voluntary protection, sometimes involuntary protection, where they didn't think they needed safety, but we had evidence that indicated they did. A lot of times it was a gang member who we had information they would be harmed by their gang, but they didn't want to leave the gangs. So we, as an agency, would place them in status, and they would stay there for years. And that's true. That is how it used to be. I was a unit manager at the time at the North facility at the penitentiary, and I had my full caseload was people who were in that protective status. And then I recall a time where the department came to us and said, this is not what the trends are in corrections anymore. We're moving away from that. So you guys need to help us come up with some creative ways to desegregate. And I was fortunate at the time that our director of adult prisons, Jerry Rourke, gave myself and a lot of the people in my facility the ability to do it ourselves, right? So we were able to come up with a plan to make sure the officers felt safe, to make sure the inmates felt safe, because the bottom line is that we were going to open the doors. So we did lots of research in advance to make sure people could be around each other, and put together lots of, we call them step down plans, to make sure that security protocol is appropriate. And I remember the day they opened the doors to that population, and it was not what we expected. We thought everybody would come out and start assaulting each other. And it turned out that they just stood there and they looked around like, do I want to leave the door? Do I want to leave this room? And it took a lot of work on our part to say, like, yes, you can, you're safe. We are going to take care of you. It was a real eye-opening experience for me, and I think for a lot of the people in our department. So it's been a big deal that we do not let people live in that it used to be 23 hours a day in the cell, and then 1 hour a day out of a cell, and that hasn't been the case probably for 8 years or so.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I was going to ask you to define what restrictive housing is.
Yeah, so our current definitions of that is the person has to have daily meaningful human contact, interaction with people. So there's always staff members in the unit talking to them, and they have to have a specific number of time out of cell. And so we make sure that happens as well. They get to come out and spend time with each other in the pod, which is sometimes called the tier. So they get to come out, and it's called tier time. They spend time doing games or hanging out with each other or whatever. And they spend time out of cell in classrooms. They spend time out of cell in the recreation yard, and they spend time out of cell for meals. So there's lots of out of cell opportunity. Whereas in the past there was I do remember a time where it was literally 1 hour a day out of cell, and that's definitely not how we function any longer.
Because I'm glad that you clarified that, because I think that there is still the thinking that that's the way it operates. So thank you for clarifying that for our listeners. Madam Secretary, crime is a big topic and a big problem in New Mexico. What are your projections for the state's prison population over the next, say, decade?
Well, we work with the Sentencing Commission. They're the statisticians who figure all that sort of statistical stuff out. So what we have thought, and according to them, is that we would see an increase of 3% over a 10-year period. So not very significant increased numbers. And I'm thinking that maybe some of that has to do with the work that we've done to try to prevent people from coming back to prison. So I'm thinking maybe as more people come in, more people are staying out. And so we'll find that balance there. But the Sentencing Commission is telling us that we will not see very significant increases in population over the next 10 years.
Okay, gotcha. Madam Secretary, if I can turn the subject over to healthcare, which is obviously another huge topic, not just in New Mexico, but across the US, but healthcare in the state's prisons. How much does the department spend on medical care for inmates annually, and what, if anything, can be done to reduce those costs?
I do have those numbers. I don't remember them off the top of my head. That's something I can have our PIO send to you
Thank
is the
you.
actual direct numbers. But we've done, I believe, everything that we can to reduce costs without reducing care. To me, that's probably more important than anything. And sometimes things have to be more expensive in order for you to get the type of service that you need. But I think one thing that will make some of a difference is change to the Medicaid dollars. In that there's this waiver that exists now where we'll be able to pay for certain items for our population using Medicaid dollars as opposed to using state general fund as it works now. For people that are getting ready to release, the ones that are 90 days or less to release, will be able to pay for things like medications and accessories is what I'm being told, like wheelchairs and those types of things that people might need. We will no longer have to pay general fund dollars for that reason. We're working real close with Healthcare Authority to make sure that we're both maximizing to the extent possible those Medicare dollars. But yeah, it's a tough thing to say reduce cost because, to be frank, sometimes things are more costly, right? I mean, we operate a long-term care unit, which essentially is a hospital inside of our prison system. And
Mhm.
we do keep people there that have to be on dialysis multiple times a week. And we have an aging population, geriatric population. So we've done things like we're training younger inmates to serve as caregivers to some of the elderly men. It sort of works like in a nursing home type of setting
Okay.
where one group of people is learning how to be caregivers and the other group of people is getting care. So those are ways that we're trying to help our populations and possibly save some money. But at the end of the day, it's not about money; it's about quality of care.
For sure, for sure. Madam Secretary, there's been an effort to bring prison operations under state control and, I guess, essentially eliminate private prisons in New Mexico. Can you help us understand why and the department's progress on that initiative?
I think there's probably a lot of reasons why. And I'm sure you're familiar with the narrative, but there's the thought out there that exists that private prison operators are almost lobbying for stricter rules for the purpose of having increased populations. We definitely don't want to see that happening in our state. It would be terrible if people were being sent to prison specifically for some private company to be making money off of them. Um, it's definitely more expensive for the state to operate institutions than it is for private organizations. But when I first came into the role, it was one of the things the governor felt very passionately about was working on reducing the number of beds. In fact, New Mexico used to have the highest number well, percentage rather, the highest percentage of prison bed dependency in the country. More than anybody else, we had private beds. And so sort of little by little, we've had these opportunities to convert facilities. Back in 2019, early on, we converted the Clayton facility, which we were seeing lots of dangerous incidents happening there, very short staffing levels when it was operated by the private organization. And we decided that we wanted to take over the operations at that facility. And pretty quickly, we were able to increase the number of staff. And we've seen that we also have been able to increase the number of program, classroom activities, and things of that nature. Facilities significantly safer than what it was when we first took it over. And then a few years later, we took over two private institutions at the same time. But we took one facility over in Santa Rosa, and then the other one we took over was in Grant. In both of those circumstances, we leased the building from the people that used to operate the building, the private prison operators that used to operate the facilities. In Grants, what we did was we consolidated it with our existing facility. So we have one warden that oversees both compounds, deputy wardens at each location. And then in Santa Rosa, we just fully took on the facility. But we did have staffing challenges there for quite some time, and we kept half the prison empty for a long time, but for safety and for facility to be under state control. It wasn't a big deal that we have the population full. Whereas for a private facility, they want as many beds filled as possible. And we didn't feel that was safe, which is the reason that we decided to take over that facility. And then finally, just this year, we closed the largest private prison facility in New Mexico. That was the Lee County Correctional Facility in Hobbs. And that was about 1,200 beds. And we had been sort of reducing their population over time. And I mean, that was a big closure. And, you know, we're hopeful for those people that they're able to find jobs. We spent lots of time in Hobbs trying to recruit those people and offer them job opportunities, not just with our agency, but with all the state organizations that have a presence down in that community. And but ultimately, it was a decision that we came together and decided that it was time to part ways after many, many years. I think 27 years is how long we've been operating that Hobbs institution. So now where we are is we only have one small contract in Otero County. It's a very specific population, and we do not take up the entire prison. In fact, the vast majority of the beds at that institution are U.S. Marshal holds and court martial holds, things of that nature. And our population is very specific. And that particular private prison operation, they have this very, it's an excellent program. It's proprietary. And we run all of our inmates through specific population of inmates through that treatment program. We also house two specialty active custody groups of individuals in that facility.
Madam Secretary, you mentioned the closure of the facility in Hobbs. Do you anticipate future closures? Because in 2021, the state announced it was planning to close the women's prison in Springer. Are those plans still in the works?
They are not. And in fact, we were looking at Springer because at the time we were seeing some very high deferred maintenance costs. We've been working little by little, year by year, to make some of those improvements. A lot of it had to do with just the old water system and things of that nature. But no, at this point, I believe that we've right-sized our population. I do remember a time where we had too many inmates for the beds that we have, but we've definitely seen a decrease over the years. And since Sentencing Commission lets us know that we should steady out, I believe that the beds that we have is just right for New Mexico.
So no closures are anticipated anytime in the future?
No anticipated closures.
Okay. Madam Secretary, I had heard that you were an avid rancher, helping your family care for horses in La Ciénaga and cattle in Tierra Maria. And my question was going to be, are you a cowgirl at heart?
Oh, yeah, there's no single doubt about it at all. I'm real grateful to my cousin Gilbert, my uncle Anthony down in the Chama area, Tierra Maria area, because they're the primary holders of the cattle, which means the rest of us city folk, we get to go and have that lifestyle and experience it. But I grew up that way. I grew up with horses and cows my whole life with my dad and my grandpa Ignacio. And it's really a beautiful and important thing to me. And I love to go meet my dad after work sometimes, because La Ciénaga is past the airport down that road. That's where we keep horses, and he lets me go over there and hang out with him, and we brush the horses. We go for little rides and things like that. So it's an important part of my life. It's definitely something I want to do more of when I have more time.
On. Well, Madam Secretary, whatever the future holds for you, happy trails. And thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you to our viewers and listeners for tuning into Around the Roundhouse. Join us every week as we talk to newsmakers in the political realm by subscribing to our podcast through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. For the latest developments, follow our coverage online at santafenewmexican.com, where you can also subscribe to our political newsletter, The Roundhouse Report. Until next time, I'm Daniel Chacón, and this has been Around the Roundhouse.